The diesel engine coughed black smoke as Captain James, Jim Calloway, yanked the steering levers hard left. His Sherman jank lurched backward down the muddy forest trail, treads chewing through fallen leaves and soft earth. Through the vision slit, he could see them coming. 3 German Tiger tanks, massive and menacing, their 88mm cannons tracking his retreat like predators sensing wounded prey. It was October 17th, 1944. The location? A nameless stretch of forest road 12 kilometers east of Nancy, France. And Jim Calloway was about to attempt something that every tank manual explicitly warned against. Something that could either save his platoon or get them all killed in the next 3 minutes. "Keep backing up," he muttered into the radio. "Don't stop, don't turn, make them think we're running scared." His gunner, Corporal Danny Hayes, 22 years old, with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since Normandy, gripped the turret controls. "Sir, they're gaining. Range 800 meters. "Good," Calloway said. "Let them get closer." This is the story of an impossible gambit, a calculated deception that turned the hunters into the hunted, and the American tank commander who proved that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to convince your enemy you've already lost. By autumn 1944, the Allied advance across France had slowed to a grinding, bloody crawl. After the breakneck pace of the summer following D-Day, German resistance had stiffened. The Wehrmacht, though battered, was far from broken. And nowhere was this more apparent in the dense forests of Lorraine, where American armored units found themselves fighting a very different kind of war. The open plains of Normandy were gone. Here, narrow forest roads hemmed in by thick trees created natural kill zones. Visibility dropped to less than 100 meters. Tank battles happened at point-blank range, where the superior armor and firepower of German tanks like the Tiger could dominate. In the tank crew's dark humor, they called Shermans Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter, because they lit up so easily when hit. Standard American doctrine for engaging Tigers was simple: avoid them if possible. If unavoidable, attack in groups, flanking from multiple directions while one tank drew fire. Use speed and numbers to compensate for inferior firepower. But in the narrow confines of the Lorraine forests, there was no room to flank, no space to maneuver. Calloway had lost 2 tanks already that week. Good men, friends. The Tigers had ambushed them from concealed positions, firing first, destroying American armor before his crews even knew they were there. The psychological effect was devastating. His men were jumpy, hesitant, seeing Tigers in every shadow. That morning, division intelligence had reported German armor moving through the sector. At least 3 Tigers, possibly more, supported by infantry. They were probing American lines, looking for weak points. Calloway's company had been ordered to hold a key forest intersection, a crossroads that controlled access to the main supply route. He studied his maps by flashlight the night before, running through scenarios. Defense wouldn't work. The Tigers would stand off at range and pick them apart. Retreat would leave the supply route exposed. So he came up with a third option, one that his commander called insane, one that just might work. "What if we don't fight them where they expect?" Calloway had said. "What if we make them come to us, on our terms, not theirs?" His plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. They would bait the Tigers into pursuing what appeared to be a retreating, disorganized American force, lead them down a specific route, deep into the forest, where Calloway had something waiting. but it required perfect timing, nerves of steel, and an enemy commander arrogant enough to take the bait. As dawn broke on October 17th, Calloway positioned his 5 Sherman tanks in a staggered line across the forest road. Behind them, hidden in carefully camouflaged positions, were 2 M10 tank destroyers borrowed from a neighboring unit. The M10s mounted a powerful 3-inch gun capable of penetrating Tiger armor from the flanks. They were his ace in the hole, but only if he could get the Tigers into position. At 0847 hours, his radio crackled. "Contact! 3 Tigers approaching from the northeast. Distance 1,200 meters." Calloway keyed his mic. "All units, this is Cobra 6. Execute Plan Charlie. I say again, execute Charlie." Charlie, the fake retreat. The gamble that would either vindicate him or see him court-martialed, assuming he survived. The first Tiger emerged from the morning mist like something out of a nightmare. Calloway saw it through his periscope, 900 meters away and closing. The massive tank moved with deliberate confidence, its long 88-millimeter barrel sweeping side to side, searching for targets. Behind it, 2 more Tigers materialized, forming a wedge formation. They had spotted his Shermans. "Steady," Calloway said to his crew. His hands were slick with sweat inside his gloves. "Wait for my command." The Tigers advanced another 100 meters, then stopped. The lead tank's turret rotated, lining up a shot. Calloway knew what came next. At this range, the Tiger could destroy his Sherman with 1 shot. He had to act first, but not to kill, to provoke. "Hayes, fire 1 round. Aim high. Miss on purpose." His gunner hesitated for half a second, then complied. The Sherman's gun barked. The shell sailed over the Tiger's turret, exploding in the trees beyond. A clean miss. The effect was immediate. The German commander would have seen the flash, marked the position, understood what he was facing. 5 American Shermans caught in the open, at least one already firing and missing. Easy prey. "All units, fall back," Calloway shouted into the radio. "Move, move, move." His Sherman lurched backward, engine roaring. Around him, the other 4 Shermans did the same, reversing down the narrow forest trail in what appeared to be panicked flight. Trees blurred past on either side. The tank bucked and jolted over roots and rocks. Hayes gripped the gun controls to keep from being thrown around the turret. "Sir, they're following," the radio crackled. It was Lieutenant Morrison and Sherman 2. "All 3 Tigers in pursuit, range 700 meters and closing." Perfect. The German commander had taken the bait. Instead of setting up a defensive position and forcing the Americans to attack on his terms, he was committing to a pursuit. Probably thinking he could catch the retreating Shermans, destroy them one by one before they could escape or regroup. It was exactly what Calloway had hoped for, and exactly what he'd feared. Because now there was no turning back. The Tigers were committed, but so was he. If this went wrong, if the timing was off by even seconds, his entire platoon would be cut to pieces. The forest trail curved ahead, winding deeper into the woods. Calloway had driven this route a dozen times, memorizing every turn, every dip and rise. 400 meters ahead was what his men had started calling the pocket. A small clearing where the trail widened slightly before narrowing again into a bottleneck. That's where his M10s were waiting,
hull down behind earthen berms on either side of the trail, invisible from the approaching direction. The plan was to lead the tigers into the pocket, then have the hidden M10s hit them from the flanks at close range while the Shermans turned to engage from the front. A three-sided ambush. But it required the tigers to follow the Shermans all the way in. If they sensed the trap and stopped, everything fell apart. 600 meters, Hayes called out, watching the range through his periscope. They're really coming on fast, sir. That's because they think they're winning, Calloway said. Keep backing up. Don't give them any reason to doubt. The Sherman's engine screamed in protest. Driving in reverse at speed through a forest was like threading a needle blindfolded. His driver, Sergeant Bill Kowalski, a Detroit native who'd worked at a Ford plant before the war, handled the controls with white-knuckled precision. One mistake, one tree clipped by a fender, and they'd bog down, become a stationary target. Through the dust and exhaust smoke, Calloway caught glimpses of the pursuing tigers. They were maintaining formation, spread out to minimize the danger of all being hit by a single shot. Professional, disciplined, but also aggressive, pressing their advantage. The German commander clearly believed he had the upper hand. 300 meters to the pocket, Kowalski called out from the driver's compartment. Calloway did the math in his head. The tigers were 500 meters back. At their current closing speed, they'd enter the kill zone approximately 50 seconds after his Shermans cleared it. That gave him less than a minute to turn his tanks around, set up, and coordinate with the M10s. All units, prepare to execute Phase 2 on my mark, he radioed. Destroyers, confirm you're in position. Destroyer 1 confirmed. We have visual on your 6. The big boys are coming right to us. Destroyer 2 confirmed. Ready to light them up on your command. Calloway's Sherman burst into the pocket. The small clearing opened up around them, maybe 60 meters across. His driver immediately threw the tank into a hard turn, the treads shrieking as they dug into the soft earth. Around him, the other 4 Shermans did the same, pivoting to face back toward the approaching Germans. "Now!" Calloway shouted. "All units, engage!" The lead tiger broke into the clearing at full speed, its commander likely still focused on the fleeing American tanks ahead. For perhaps 2 seconds, everything seemed frozen. The German crew had just enough time to realize something was very wrong. The Shermans weren't running anymore. They were facing forward, guns leveled. And then the forest erupted. The first M10 fired from the left flank, its 3-inch gun thundering from its concealed position 80 meters away. The armor-piercing round struck the lead tiger's right side, just below the turret ring, where the armor was thinner. The impact was catastrophic. Metal tore. The tiger shuddered to a stop, black smoke billowing from its engine deck. A second later, ammunition inside cooked off, the explosion blowing the turret halfway off its moorings. Before the second tiger could react, the other M10 engaged from the right flank. Another thunderous report, another hit, this time penetrating the rear of the middle tiger's hull. The tiger slewed sideways as its driver, probably wounded or dead, lost control. The third tiger, trailing slightly behind, managed to halt and begin traversing its turret toward the M10 on the left. But Calloway's Shermans were already firing. At this range, less than 200 meters, even the Sherman's 75mm gun could threaten a tiger's weaker side armor. 5 tanks firing in rapid succession. Not all rounds hit. Several glanced off the heavy frontal armor or missed entirely in the smoke and confusion, but numbers told. One round struck the tiger's left track, immobilizing it. Another penetrated the thinner rear armor. "Keep firing!" Calloway yelled. "Don't let them recover!" His gunner pumped round after round into the stationary Tiger. The German crew tried to return fire, their 88mm gun roaring once, the shell screaming past Calloway's Sherman, so close he felt the compression wave. But a damaged Tiger with a broken track, surrounded on 3 sides, couldn't maneuver, couldn't withdraw. A sitting target. The second M10 shifted its aim from the middle Tiger, now burning fiercely, to the third. Another carefully aimed shot. Another penetration. The Tiger's engine exploded in a gout of flame and oily smoke. The commander's hatch popped open. A German tanker emerged, hands raised, in surrender, face blackened with soot. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the firing stopped. The clearing was choked with smoke. The smell of cordite, burning rubber, and diesel fuel hung in the air like a physical presence. 3 Tigers, pride of the German Panzerwaffe, sat destroyed or disabled within a space smaller than a football field. Calloway's hands were shaking. His ears rang from the concussion of the guns. Around him, his crew was silent, stunned by what they'd just accomplished. Through his periscope, he could see German tankers crawling from their wrecked vehicles, some wounded, others simply shocked. Infantry from his supporting unit moved in to take them prisoner. "Cease fire," he said into the radio. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "All units, cease fire! Secure the prisoners!" Lieutenant Morrison's voice came over the radio, high and incredulous. "Sir, did we just—" "Yeah, we just did."
The Battle of the Pocket, as it came to be known in the after-action reports, lasted less than 4 minutes, from first shot to last. In that brief span, Calloway's improvised ambush had destroyed 3 German Tiger tanks and killed or captured their crews. His own losses? 1 Sherman with minor damage from a near miss. 0 casualties. When division headquarters received the report, there was initial disbelief. Tigers didn't fall into traps. They set them. But the physical evidence was undeniable. 3 burned-out hulks, German prisoners being processed, and the testimony of multiple witnesses, including infantry who had watched the entire engagement from concealed positions. What Captain Calloway had done was both brilliantly simple and extraordinarily risky. He had exploited a fundamental aspect of tank warfare that the Germans themselves had taught the world: aggression and momentum. The same offensive spirit that had powered the blitzkrieg through Poland and France in the war's early years had become, in this instance, a liability. The German Tiger commander had seen what appeared to be a textbook situation: inferior enemy tanks caught in the open, fleeing in disorder. His tactical doctrine, his training, his experience all said, press the attack, don't give them time to regroup, exploit the advantage. And so he had committed to pursuit without adequate reconnaissance, without considering that the American panic might be staged. It was a masterclass in deception. Calloway had understood something crucial about combat psychology. Soldiers, even experienced ones, see what they expect to see. The German commander expected American Shermans to retreat when confronted by Tigers. That's what had happened in previous engagements. So when Calloway's tanks did exactly that, it confirmed the Germans' assumptions. He never looked for the trap, because he didn't believe there was one. But the operation hadn't been without enormous risk. If the Tigers had stopped and set up a defensive position, Calloway's Shermans would have been forced to attack them frontally, likely with devastating losses. If the German commander had sent scouts ahead or called for aerial reconnaissance,
The hidden M10s would have been spotted. If the timing had been off by even seconds, if one Sherman had gotten stuck during the retreat, the whole plan would have collapsed. Calloway was recommended for the Silver Star, though he never spoke much about the battle afterward. When asked by a Stars and Stripes reporter how he'd come up with the plan, his answer was typically understated. Tigers are tough, but they're still just machines driven by men, and men make mistakes when they think they're winning. The tactical lessons from the pocket were distributed through training bulletins across the armored divisions, not as a template to be blindly copied, but as an example of adaptive thinking. The manual said Shermans couldn't beat Tigers head-on. Calloway hadn't tried to. Instead, he'd changed the equation, turned the Tigers' strengths into weaknesses. In the weeks that followed, similar ambush tactics began appearing in other sectors. American tank commanders, emboldened by Calloway's success, started experimenting with feigned retreats, baiting German armor into pre-sighted kill zones. The Germans, in turn, became more cautious, more reluctant to pursue fleeing American tanks. The psychological dynamic had shifted. But there's a darker side to this story that the official reports glossed over, one that Calloway himself rarely discussed, even with his own crew. The 3 German Tiger crews destroyed in the pocket weren't seasoned Eastern Front veterans. They were part of a hastily formed reserve unit newly arrived from Germany. Their commander was a lieutenant on his first operational deployment. The crew of the lead Tiger included 2 18-year-olds who'd been in combat for less than a week. Calloway learned this from the prisoners afterward. These weren't the panzer aces of popular imagination. They were young men, inadequately trained, thrown into a war that was already lost, expected to make up with fanaticism what they lacked in experience. The German officer corps was desperate by late 1944, promoting anyone with basic training to fill the gaps left by years of attrition. Calloway had faced the same ethical reckoning that haunts all soldiers who survive combat. He had killed men, young men, not much different from his own crew. Men who probably didn't want to be there any more than he did. The trap he had set had worked brilliantly, but brilliant didn't change the fact that 12 human beings had died or been maimed in those 4 minutes. You don't celebrate after something like that. You just carry it. His gunner, Hayes, developed a tremor in his hands that never fully went away. Morrison, who'd been so jubilant immediately after the battle, became withdrawn, quiet. War isn't a clean narrative of heroes and villains. It's a series of terrible decisions made by frightened people trying to survive in circumstances no one should have to endure.
So what do we take from this? What's the real lesson of Captain Calloway's impossible gambit? It's not that deception is a silver bullet. It's not that clever tactics can always overcome material disadvantage. Because for every ambush that succeeds, there are a dozen that fail. For every calculated risk that pays off, there are countless others that end in disaster. The real lesson is about adaptation, about refusing to accept that the situation is hopeless just because the manual says it is. Calloway looked at the problem. Tigers in close terrain with Shermans that couldn't penetrate their armor, and instead of accepting defeat, he asked, "What if I changed the terms of the engagement?" He understood his enemy, not just their equipment, but their mindset, their training, their expectations. He knew that German tank doctrine emphasized aggressive pursuit, so he gave them what they were trained to respond to, a retreating enemy. And in their eagerness to exploit what seemed like an advantage, they walked into his trap. But he also understood his own limitations. He didn't try to out-tiger the tigers. He didn't pretend his Shermans were something they weren't. Instead, he used their speed, their numerical advantage, and most crucially, he stacked the deck by bringing in the M10s, weapons specifically designed to kill heavy armor. Modern military planners study engagements like this not because they expect to replicate them exactly, but because they illustrate principles: surprise, deception, concentration of force at the decisive point, knowing when to fight and when to retreat. These concepts transcend any specific weapon system or era. Years after the war, in one of his rare interviews, Calloway was asked if he'd been afraid that day. His response cuts to the heart of what combat actually is. "Terrified," he said, "the whole time, from the moment we saw those tigers until well after the shooting stopped." Fear is a constant in combat. It doesn't go away. You just learn to act in spite of it. The thing people don't understand about battles like that is how much is just chaos, confusion. You make a plan, and the second the shooting starts, half of it goes wrong. Communications break down, someone's in the wrong position, the enemy does something unexpected. All you can do is adjust and hope your core idea still works. Those tigers, I didn't beat them because I was smarter or braver than their crews. I beat them because I had terrain that favored ambush. I had tank destroyers they didn't know about, and their commander made a decision based on incomplete information. On another day, in another place, it could have easily been them setting the trap and us driving into it. War isn't about heroes. It's about situations and what you do when you find yourself in one. So here's what I want you to think about. Not as a soldier, but as someone who faces their own battles, their own impossible situations. When you're facing something that seems unbeatable, when the odds are stacked against you, when every conventional approach says you should just give up or retreat, do you accept that verdict? Or do you look for the angle, the unexpected approach, the way to change the terms of the engagement so that your weaknesses become irrelevant and your strengths become decisive? Calloway didn't beat the tigers by being stronger. He beat them by being smarter about when and where and how the fight happened. He made them come to him. He made them commit before they realized what they were committing to. And when the moment came, he was ready. That takes preparation. It takes understanding not just your own capabilities, but your opponent's. It takes the courage to try something unconventional, knowing that if it fails, people will call it reckless. And it takes the honesty to acknowledge afterward that success often includes elements of luck, timing, and circumstance that no amount of planning can fully control. I've told you Captain Calloway's story, the fake retreat that became a deadly trap, the impossible ambush that worked because someone dared to think differently. Now I want to hear from you. What battle are you facing where the conventional wisdom says you can't win? What tigers are bearing down on you, seemingly unstoppable? And what would your ambush look like? What's the terrain you control, the assets they don't know about, and the moment when you stop retreating and turn to fight on your terms? Think about it. Plan it. And when the moment comes, be ready to spring your own trap. Let me know in the comments below.